Welcome to the Creepy Parlour, where we delve into the dark side with an undercurrent of light-hearted fun. Our discussions will explore gothic, macabre, or creepy topics. The first Tuesday of every month, we will host a haunted happy hour where you can join us for a group conversation that focuses on ghosts, weird events, urban legends, and more. Here at the Creepy Parlour, our subject matter may be spooky, but our spirits are high. You can catch the Creepy Parlour every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on WLFE DB Radio.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Creepy Parlour. I am Genevieve, and I'm absolutely thrilled that you decided to spend your evening with me for the next hour. Tonight, we are celebrating the amazing, wonderful master of the macabre, Edgar Allan Poe. I have a very special guest with me tonight. His name is Jad, and he hosts the annual Edgar Allan Poe birthday event. So I'm going to bring him on.
Hey there.
Welcome to the Creepy Parlour.
Thank you for having me at the Creepy Parlour. This is great. I'm excited to be on here.
I'm so excited. We met last year when you hosted a wonderful Edgar Allan Poe birthday celebration. Loved the fact that not only that you were celebrating Edgar Allan Poe, but you were also supporting local artists.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's something that's very near and dear to my heart. You know, I consider myself a local artist, a writer specifically. So every event that I try to do, whenever I'm organizing, I try to get local artists, whether they're musicians or writers or painters, as involved as much in the process as possible. So
it's very much appreciated. I'm going to put up your banner so we can show off your website here. So tell us a little bit about what you do with Collab.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm a collaborator with them. I've been so for many years now. I ran a workshop with them for about 5 or 6 years called Lit Lab, where we would create, stories or poetry in response to kind of the work that a lot of social advocates and community organizations were doing around the New Brunswick area. So that's been a lot of fun. Recently with the pandemic, we've been, strictly online. Every Tuesdays, usually around this time.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's totally cool. And I play a literary game with a writer friend of mine. So they have about 20 minutes to compose a piece. I have some virtual D&D dice that I roll, which determines like the prompt and different literary elements and techniques that they have to use and be able to complete with that. So.
Oh, that's very cool.
It's super fun, and we definitely want to have you on it sometime soon.
I would like that.
That'd be great. And aside from that, I'm also a writer. I like speculative fiction a lot. I like writing horror fantasy, and some sci-fi. So
we'll have to talk about that too.
Yeah.
So we did meet through an Edgar Allan Poe event that you hosted. So what is what's your relationship with Poe like? I'm assuming that because you were hosting a party for him on his birthday, that he's got to have a little bit of a special place in your heart, right?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a fan. It's simple as that. I was first introduced to the works of Poe when I first entered high school.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really around that time that I wanted to be a creative writer. So I was just completely mesmerized, by the stories that I had read. The first one being A Telltale Heart, of course.
That was mine too.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, I just remember sitting in English class. I don't know if it was like my second or third year. And, going through it and just being completely taken away by Poe. So he's definitely a big inspiration on my writing.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely got me into the short story format, kind of like his philosophies and thoughts behind that. And really showed me that, there can be a lot of substance given to like horror fiction, specifically in this case too. In these different types of layers, kind of as opposed to, what I've been growing up kind of seeing, within the same genre within that too. So yeah, he's definitely like formative. His work at least is rather formative to me as a writer.
I definitely agree. I was first introduced to Poe at a really young age. I had a librarian, one of those grammar school librarians, who would show us cartoons, and she showed us the Telltale Heart in cartoon version.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, I can't remember exactly what grade I was in, but I was young enough that we still had the librarian coming to visit our class, and I was absolutely mesmerized by that. Not just the fact that it was an animated story, but it was so gruesome, and it
Really?
was. I mean, just the story itself is pretty gruesome, and to think about that when you're a kid, it just kind of sticks with you a bit.
Yeah, I was thinking earlier, how would you, what's an age appropriate, I guess, time to show or expose a child to Poe's work, and how you would do it, right? Is there like Poe for kids?
Yeah,
Or, and you said that the animation was gruesome too, so that's really interesting. Cool librarian, point
yeah,
to
she was very yes. But I do have a Poe coloring book, so that might be a nice little segue for a kid to get into Edgar Allan Poe, thanks to my sister. Um,
excellent.
but I think one of the things that people often don't really fully understand about Poe is that he was so much more than just this gruesome author. He did so many more things. Many people consider him to be the father of the detective story.
Yeah.
Science fiction kind of started around that time. He was really instrumental in starting that, and he was a brilliant poet. Um, do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite piece of his?
Um, in terms of his poetry, obviously The Raven is the classic.
Mm-hmm.
Still is just phenomenal every time I read it. Annabelle Lee is another one of my favorites. I really enjoy The Bells. It's a very rhythmic song.
Oh,
Kind of basic rhythm and such too. But Phil Oakes did a really great cover of it
oh,
um,
really?
back in the late '60s, I think. Yeah. Um, so that's a really fun one to kind of go through. It has a very melodic vibe with that. In terms of his stories, I think my favorite of his is either The Telltale Heart or The Fall of the House of Usher. I kind of go back and forth between the
Mm-hmm.
two for ones that I really enjoy. And I actually ended up reading three stories today.
Did you?
Yeah, the Auguste Dupont trilogy. So
Oh,
the Murders in the Rue Morgue,
mm-hmm.
the murder of Marie Roget, and of course the Purloined Letter. And that was a
Did
lot of fun.
you know that the murder of Marie Roget was based on a story that happened here in New Jersey?
Yes, Mary Rogers, right?
Yes.
She was murdered, and she was found in the Hudson near
Mm-hmm.
Hoboken, I believe, right?
Yeah, so there there's so many connections to Poe in this area, and I think that that's another reason why I felt so drawn to him for so long. There's a fantastic tour in Greenwich Village that has all the spots where Poe lived, because he was so poor for so much of his
Yeah.
life, for his adult life, that oftentimes they would just move. They didn't have the money to pay rent, and they would just move.
Yeah.
So a fantastic tour. That was Burrows of the Dead. I think they do the Poe tour. Um, but I do have a question that I'd like to pop up here, because this is a really good question. This is something I was going to touch on a little bit later, but since Jillian, my sister, brought it up now, can you see that comment?
I can. That is so
Okay,
cool. I don't know how
excellent.
to use StreamYard. I gotta. I've been using it for like a year, and I
This is
know.
a cool, really cool feature. Um, so Jill says, I know we're celebrating Uncle Edgar's birthday, but what does Jad think of the mystery surrounding Poe's death? So I
Mm.
guess we can delve into that now, because if you have any thoughts on that, because I think that's probably one of the most mysterious things about him, is the way that he died.
Yeah, very odd, right? They found him in Baltimore, where I don't think he was even in Baltimore at the time. Well, I mean, he was clearly there, but I don't
Yeah.
think people knew that he was in Baltimore.
Well, he had stopped. He was on a train to, I think, Philadelphia, and he got off of the train, and no one knows why.
Yeah,
And that's why he got off in Baltimore.
yeah, and they found him. I think pretty much drugged and very groggy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I guess beaten pretty much to near death or something similar to that. And then he was found by someone, I think, who recognized him, and was then contacted another like friend of Poe's that he had known and told him about, where he was in the situation. And then Poe never really recovered from that. I believe he just, kind of died.
So I think one of the interesting things about that is that he was recognized. So at the time of his death, he had gained a lot of fame because he had been touring and doing readings.
Yeah,
or
the Raven.
Yeah. So the fact that he was recognized, I mean, it breaks my heart to think that he was somewhat famous. He was famous enough to be recognized in a time before social media. Yet he didn't have the money to make ends meet.
Yeah.
And when they found him, he was found not wearing his own clothing, which is another really interesting thing too, because even though he was not known to have a lot of money throughout his adult life, he was always impeccably dressed.
Yeah. It was funny. I heard he had only one coat that he owned. He would just take care of, and he wouldn't necessarily change his shirt. He would have like a dirty shirt under it that he would kind of like buckle up to the top and have his little tie and kind of stick to that look. And primarily, I believe, because of his upbringing, right?
Yes.
He had that very like Southern gentlemanly like or what's called, not perspective, but lifestyle, in the sense that he was taught to be social, taught to dress and look nice, and to interact with those around them,
Yep.
in a
and I think
manner.
that just adds a little bit more. I think that it's he got so much of his my perspective is that he got so much of his creative energy from all of the adversity that he had faced. I mean, he lost his mother at age 2.
Yeah.
He lost his foster mother, who he adored. His foster father and he never got along.
John Allan, yeah.
John Allan never formally adopted him, and then
Left him out of his
basically
will.
disowned him.
Yeah. Yeah, he left him out of his will, completely cut him off. Yeah.
I mean, I can't even imagine. But I did read one article that talked about Poe and why they didn't quite get along. And some of it was based on the fact that John Allan had illegitimate children. And Edgar was so protective over his foster mother that he just couldn't forgive his foster father for doing that.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of tension there.
He apparently used to witness John Allan cheating a lot, right?
Yeah.
And Poe, only having been raised by his mother prior to that, who died very young, I think at the age of 23 or 25 or something. Only had 1 or 2 siblings, a brother who also didn't last long. He was definitely much more attuned or sensitive, I think, towards how women were treated at the time.
Oh, I think so, yeah.
Or at least had that inkling that you can kind of figure out just by reading his letters and such, that he probably didn't fit into, I guess, that manly or machismo-like culture that probably John Allan would have expected him to have too, right?
Wasn't he a tobacco merchant? So he was very, very prosperous.
Yes, that's a nice way of putting it. It was very prosperous and very cool towards him. Yeah. I think it goes to show that, Edgar Allan Poe had a lot of trauma, definitely a lot of mental health issues.
I think so. I think, and I just posted up a comment here from my friend Dominic that he was a poet. Substance abuse. That is a common theory about Poe. There have been some theories that he was very sensitive to alcohol, and that when he drank just a little bit, he just didn't process it like a normal person. So he would get incredibly intoxicated just from a little bit of alcohol. But at the time of his death, he was actually part of the temperance movement. So the temperance movement was against drinking alcohol. So I wonder if maybe there's a lot of theories about his death.
Yeah. So what's the theory that you, I guess, subscribe to?
So I'm fascinated by all of them. I think for a little while, everyone thought it was rabies. For a while, people thought he was poisoned or that he was murdered. I think they've exhumed parts of him, and they've proven that it was not, at least it wasn't arsenic or something to that effect.
Yeah.
But I think the most interesting one is the cooping theory. Have you heard this one?
Yes, that was the traditional, or not traditional, I would say.
I hope not.
Shady practice of getting people to vote twice, right?
Yes.
You kind of drug them or get them kind of hopped up on whatever substance and dress them up in different people's clothing and take them into different polling stations and having them vote for, local politicians.
Yeah. And there was an election that day that he was found, or like right around that time. So I think that could have possibly played into it. Maybe somebody had done that with Edgar and not realizing his sensitivity to alcohol, and maybe that's what tipped him over.
Yeah.
But the people have this romantic notion of him being this opium user and this this wild drug-addled drunk, and I don't think that was necessarily him. I think it's hard for people to separate out that macabre fiction and imagine that that's an actual person. I think we kind of do that with authors today too.
Yeah. It's so funny you bring that up, right? As having thrown an Edgar Allan Poe birthday party / exhibit, I can say that our culture is very much entrenched in hero worship, right?
Oh, definitely.
We like having this idea of that there's a person who did something so amazing and so miraculous that we have to, give them some sort of worship in some way, shape, or form, right? And this can be taken in a religious and a non-religious context, right? And we really do like to romanticize writers. But I think the truth of it, is that ultimately we don't know, right? We weren't alive when Edgar was alive. We couldn't interview him. He couldn't be tested by or diagnosed by professionals. There are, instances of figures getting wildly drunk from time to time, like Ulysses S. Grant. It's a really great example of that, who made apparently such an impact while inebriated that, he developed a reputation that kind of centered around that, but is not necessarily indicative or reflective of who he was as a person or his, in terms of his, military and presidential abilities. And I think the same goes with Poe there too. I'm sure he had a relationship with it, with alcohol, understandably so. I
think a lot of people did at that time. A lot of people do now.
Yeah, a lot of people do now, right? So I think to put a label on it is ultimately it's inaccurate. I don't want to say it's good or bad.
I think it's a little unfair.
It's definitely a little unfair because he doesn't have a platform to really defend himself and in terms of what he did too. But it's also keep in mind too that people are complicated, right?
Absolutely.
People are very, very complicated. That's something we know now. Mental health is a serious thing, and just kind of reading up on Poe and going through his stuff, that really does become very indicative of him as that character. So or as that being a feature of him rather. So I think that we have to be able to look at the different layers, the complexity of who Poe was as a person. How did that translate into his work, and why this work is so influential, and there's this kind of like legacy that still exists around him and surrounding him within that.
My friend Karen just posted, and watching his wife didn't help either. Watching his wife.
Oh yeah.
So that did not help. So Edgar did marry Virginia. She was very young. She was also his cousin. That brings up a lot of controversy as well.
Yeah.
But what I didn't realize until very recently, that Edgar had lived with his aunt, who he called Muddy, and Virginia, who he called Sissy. He had lived with them for quite some time. And at the time that he proposed to her, his aunt was planning to marry Virginia off to a different cousin.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, no, please don't separate the family. I'll marry her and keep her here. So on the one hand, it's also this was not as uncommon as people think.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a different time, so the cultural perspective on a lot of things, including like marriage, it was different than it is today. Obviously, science, with the development of science and things, we learn a lot more. about human behavior and genetics, and how that kind of like forms and shapes throughout society. But for his case, if you really look at his life as a whole, right? He said this quote where it's like he has these moments of sanity with long
Yes.
bouts of insanity, or something
Yes.
along that. I'm sure I butchered it, but he was a person that never had stability in the household or communal support, right?
Yeah, true.
Literally from a young age. I think he lost his mother when he was like 3 or 4. He was watching her, puke out blood and all these different things.
And it was always tuberculosis.
Yeah, it took his mom, it took his brother, it took his foster mother, Mrs. Allan, right? And it took eventually Virginia, his wife, and cousin, and what he referred to in a letter once as Sissy too. And I think it's because he probably was in so much. And again, I'm not a psychoanalyst or anything like that. But,
and can you psychoanalyze?
Oh yeah, so let me pull out my magical doctorate and go into that. But I would think that just reading about all that trauma, especially from a young age, and finding a sense of stability and not wanting to change that would be kind of like expected from his behavior. You know what I mean? Not to marry whomever, but he probably was just so concerned about keeping some sort of stability going on, that probably just seemed like his only option. I mean, I'm sure he loved her. He has letters to her, like, she's clearly prevalent in his work. But yeah, it's a tough situation because, the way we perceive, interactions and relationships and marriages now is totally different than how it would have been 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and even a couple thousand years ago,
But it is very clear that they did have a very loving relationship, and that her passing really just tormented. It went on. Her illness went on for years, and every time she would start to get a little bit better, she would revert back. And at one point, they were so poor that when they were living in the Bronx, that they didn't even have blankets for her bed. They were using just people's overcoats. People were donating blankets to them in the middle of January. It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah. Poverty is a real thing, and it's something that has been around for a very long time. It affects people. And, it really does require a lot of communal support. And I think that's something, that I'm just even realizing now as we speak. It's something that he really didn't have,
He didn't. And even within his own community, I mean, he was, I think from my perspective, he was such a talented writer, but he was also a critic. He was and he did not make a lot of friends in being such a critic.
Not at all. Cost him his job as an editor, right?
Absolutely.
There's a really great drunk history thing on Poe and his editorial position, how he lost the job, which I highly recommend.
Oh yeah, I'll have to take a look. I'm writing it down. But it also, I mean, it created the enemy in Griswold, Rufus Wilmot Griswold, who ended up writing Poe's obituary. And a lot of what we still know today about Edgar Allan Poe is because of what Griswold wrote.
Yeah. He was trying to slander, I think, Poe, right?
Oh, absolutely. He's the one who said that Poe died from alcohol and that no one showed up to his funeral, and just some really, really, for the time, very nasty. When you read it, you read it now and you think, oh, that's not so bad. But when you put it in context of the time, it was pretty bad. And it was someone's obituary. So that was like his legacy. And for a while, I think he was the only person who originally wrote Poe's biography. So everything that he said was kind of taken as fact.
Yeah.
And I find it very interesting that people visit Poe's grave to this day. Griswold is buried in some far-off cemetery, and nobody knows who he is anymore.
Yeah, the karma, right? I mean, Poe is known to be very arrogant and temperamental. He definitely burnt a lot of professional bridges.
I think a lot of artists do.
Yeah, right. Very famously, Harlan Ellison also. In the 80s and 90s. But yeah, and Griswold was one of those people that he had burnt, I think, due to a poetic review, that Griswold wanted Poe to be in, or have Poe to be submitted in. I wasn't really fond of the content, wrote a very scathing review for that too. And it was a paid review, I believe also. This is something Edgar Allan Poe got paid for, so he just kind of took the money and bounced with that. And yes, it definitely would have been scandalous.
There you go. We're gonna do a quick commercial break and we'll come back and we'll do some Poe readings. You good with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I got my Poe book here. I've never been on a show that had a commercial break before. I feel honored.
Oh yes, WLFE DB Radio. We're gonna go to commercial. Hold please.
WLFE-DB.com, where you can find vodcast shows, podcasts, and more like Where's My Sage, Inside the Drag Closet, Across the Pond, Paratalk Radio, Just Cindy, and more. So go check out WLFE-DB.com, where talk radio is a whole lot better. Our shows are your shows, and that there makes for a great talk radio.
Hey guys and dolls, this is Casey DeVille, the better half of DeVille Inc., Baltimore, Maryland. If you're ever in Baltimore, stop in and see me and Tony. Invisible Brie, 5920 Eastern Avenue, Baltimore, Maryland, 21224. Give us a call if you're in the area, 410-400-9641, or look us up on the web at DeVilleInc.com. DeVille Inc., where we specialize in you.
Ted Van Son Jr. is a seasoned investigator and well-versed in the ways of paranormal investigation. He is now ready to share his ideas and unique approach with all of you. Flashlight, recorder, and comfortable shoes. Hit the ground running as you follow this easy step-by-step guide to a fun and thorough paranormal investigation, perfect for first-time and lightly seasoned investigators. Think outside the paranormal box. Learn all about the technology and techniques used back in the early days of paranormal investigation. You can find these valuable resources online at Goodreads, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and Amazon. Get yours today.
Hi, I'm Jenna Grover. In the world of fashion, we get lost in the cost. Everyone wants that special piece of quality jewelry, but they can't afford it. Not on my watch. I sell handmade quality jewelry for a fraction of the price, and that includes jewelry made of sea glass, natural stone, crystal beads, glass beads, Bigfoot jewelry, and more. If you don't see what you want, email me, because I make custom jewelry too. Check out my website at gbythesea.com. Also, you can email me at jewelry@gbythesea.com. You're listening to WLFE DB Radio. Now, back to our program.
There we are.
Hey.
So, since we are celebrating Poe a little bit, even though we kind of got into a little bit of his personal business there, I thought it'd be really cool if we picked a piece that we really like and read it. So, would you like to go first? You're the guest.
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I want to read his poem, Israfel, which is really cool. And this is a poem that actually has an Islamic reference to it.
Oh, cool.
With the angel Israfel, who, according to the Quran, was known to have a probably the most beautiful voice of all the angels of God, right? So we know like Michael and Raphael and the other two Ninja Turtles. So this is Israfel. By Edgar Allan Poe. All right. In heaven a spirit doth dwell, whose heartstrings are a lute. None sing so wildly well as the angel Israfel. And the giddy stars, so legends tell, ceasing their hymns, attend the spell of his voice all mute. Tottering above in her highest noon, the enamored moon blushes with love, while to listen the red levin with the rapid Pleiades even, which were 7, pauses in heaven. And they say, the starry choir and all the listening things, that Israfeli's fire is owing to that lyre, by which he sits and sings, the trembling living wire of those unusual strings. But the skies that angel trod, where deep thoughts are a duty, where love's a grown-up god, where the houri glances are imbued with all the beauty which we worship in a star. Therefore, thou art not wrong, Israfeli, whose dipsiest and unimpassioned song, to thee the laurels belong, best bard, because the wisest, merrily live and long. The ecstasies above, with thy burning measures suit, thy grief, thy joy, thy hate, thy love, with the fervor of thy lute, well may the stars be mute. Yes, heaven is thine, but this is a world of sweets and sours. Our flowers are merely flowers, and the shadow of thy perfect bliss is the sunshine of ours. If I could dwell where Isaphel hath dwelt, and he were I, he might not sing so wildly well. Immortal melody, while a bolder note than this might swell from my lyre within the sky. That's it.
And it's so much more than just the macabre, right?
Definitely, it's funny because we like to have these kind of ideas on what horror writers are like, and such, and it's, I fear sometimes we kind of stick to genre a little bit, right?
We do.
To that, so we expect, blood and guts if you're into like slasher, or you expect a twist ending if you like the psychological horror, but it's a little bit more than that too, and especially with Poe, he does have a lot of deeper kind of like philosophical inclinations to a lot of his writings that are not necessarily predicated on horror. So.
And I think a lot of his horror writings were actually driven by what the audience wanted. That's what people were looking for at that time. So they were really sort of driving that from him. And I think one of the other really fascinating things about him too is that he was one of the very first professional authors. Someone who didn't have family money, someone who was really just trying to make a living being a writer.
Yeah, he understood the business of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was employed as a writer, which is a rarity even till now.
Yep.
For a lot of people. Didn't make a lot of money off of it, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. How much was he paid for The Raven? Was it something like $6? $14. Imagine. I think
$14.
$14. So I'm going to take a minute to read my very, very, very favorite poem, A Dream Within a Dream.
Good one.
Those who know me know that I absolutely love this one. A Dream Within a Dream. Take this kiss upon the brow, and in parting from you now, thus much let me avow, you are not wrong who deem that my days have been a dream. Yet if hope has flown away, in a night or in a day, in a vision or in none, is it therefore the less gone? All that we see or seem is but a dream within a dream. I stand amid the roar of a surf-tormented shore, and I hold within my hand grains of the golden sand. How few, yet how they creep through my fingers to the deep, while I weep, while I weep. O God, can I not grasp them with a tighter clasp? O God, can I not save one from the pitiless wave? Is all that we see or seem but a dream within a dream? My very, very favorite poem, 1849, which just happens to be the year that Edgar died. So a little bit on that.
Yes.
So we did talk a little bit about his death as hold on one second. So we did talk a little bit about the mystery behind Edgar's death, but also I think one of the strangest things too is that the poor guy just couldn't even get a break after he died. His original grave was at Westminster Hall in Baltimore. I'm going to go to that in a second. But it was unmarked. So when they were bringing his gravestone, forgive me if you've heard this already, but they were bringing his gravestone to the grave, and the train that it was on crashed.
Oh, man.
So it was destroyed.
I've not heard that. That's terrible.
So he had like a small grave marker, and then years later, there was a teacher in Baltimore who got all the kids together and they raised money. They brought in all their pennies to actually make that iconic marker that Poe is now buried under. So they had to actually exhume Poe's body to bring him and rebury him. They first, because his grave was unmarked, they unearthed the wrong body, went back in, found him, and they decided that it was definitely him based on the odd shape of his skull.
Oh yeah, I did hear about this one. Yeah.
So when they exhumed him and they reburied him toward the front of Westminster, burial ground, they decided to bring his mother-in-law and his wife to bury with him. His wife had been buried up in the Bronx, but years before they had exhumed all of the bodies to make way for a highway. So her bones were actually under one of Poe's friends' bed. He had saved her bones and preserved them under his bed.
Yo, what a friend.
Exactly.
That's loyalty.
Exactly.
That's hardcore loyalty.
Yeah. Seriously.
I don't know if I
do
did
it
any of my friends' bones.
A shout out to my friend Dominic here, who he is also a poet, and he wants to just have you ever heard of Mind's Eye or this other book named Two? Those are his books. So
Nice.
He's shameless, and I have to mention him.
I'll have to check it out.
I'll send you the information later.
You do, yeah. Happy to support.
So one of the really, I think another just reflection of the fact that Poe's legacy is so strong is that there was a mysterious visitor to Poe's grave every year, for which
Poe toaster.
I've brought my own. So I figured that since there is no longer, well, let's talk about the Poe toaster before we get into this. So every year there was a mysterious, I believe it was a man. I don't know if anyone's even confirmed that.
Mm-hmm.
A mysterious figure would arrive at Poe's grave and leave 3 red roses, a bottle of cognac, and toast to Poe. And this person was known as the Poe toaster.
I don't have cognac, but
it's good enough. Well,
to the Poe toaster. I'm kind of upset that tradition isn't still going on.
I kind of want to do it.
Who's going to stop it?
That's true. But now I've broadcast to everyone that I'm going to do it.
I mean, if anything, that'll get people more excited and want to go visit, right? I've never been to the museum, by the way. I think you've mentioned to me that you've toured it, or that you went down to see the toaster. Am I correct on that?
No, I went on a trip a few years ago where I did sort of a road trip down to North Carolina. On my way back, I went to the Richmond, Virginia Museum, which is they call it the Edgar Allan Poe Museum. I want to say the Poe House, but I think that's incorrect. Where they had a ton of memorabilia. They had the clothes that he was found in when he was right before he passed away. They had the candelabra that he wrote the bells under.
Ooh.
They had his desk from the Southern Literary Messenger. And interestingly, the back of the chair was removed. I think I mentioned this to you the other night. The back of the chair was removed because his boss kept finding him slouching or slacking off at work. So he took the back off so that he would improve his posture. Well, let's sit up. One of the things I did learn too at the museum is that John Allan tried to give Poe to his sister in Scotland because he spent some time in Scotland when he was young. So the whole family went over there, and John Allan just disliked this poor kid and tried to leave him in Scotland and convinced his sister to adopt him.
What a terrible place to leave people at.
I wouldn't mind.
I know Scotland's actually pretty cool. No Scotland.
As I drink my toast. Yeah, so a lot of really interesting things about Poe. I think that really there is so much. The mythology really has become larger than life. And when we talked a little bit earlier about the drug use and potential mental illness and things like that, That famous photograph that everyone sees of Edgar Allan Poe, the one that's just reproduced everywhere, that was taken only 2 or 3 days after a suicide attempt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so here's this iconic photograph, and the poor guy is just devastated. And
Yeah.
at the time, we didn't have the technology to take constant photographs. So those little snapshots in time were pretty much it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. He was also a bit of a self-saboteur.
I think a lot of artists are.
Oh, not some stuff right there.
I'm married to an artist, so. We have a comment from Liz too. I love that in his teenage years he was athletic, even swam up a river because it was at least a mile. He was also in West Point, so
Yeah.
he was incredibly athletic. Not the image that people really want to perpetuate, I think. And
Yeah. Didn't he swim through
Yeah.
the Hudson or something
Yep.
like that? Or yeah,
Mhm.
like 6 miles or
Yeah,
something
and
ridiculous. Yeah, when he was younger.
they say that he was incredibly funny, that he really was like sarcastically funny. And oddly enough, he hated Boston. Did you know that?
I mean, who doesn't?
You
I
don't
mean,
like
you
Boston, you don't like Scotland. What's going on here?
I'm just kidding. All love to Boston. Boston's a beautiful city. I actually have a lot of great memories in Boston and such too. Really like superbly clean. If there's anyone from Boston
Oh
up
yeah,
here, I'm like very
one
impressed
of my
by
favorite cities.
that. But yeah, he was definitely an interesting dude. I think he was just a dude. There's moments and days where we have good days and bad days, and I'm sure he had many good days. I remember reading an anecdote about after the Raven being published, how kids would come up to him and kind of flap their arms like wings and such, and he would kind of play along with them and laugh about it too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something to keep in mind, right? Especially in this world of hero worship, is that he's human. He experienced these different feelings and such. And he wasn't perfect. A lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
A really interesting factoid was that he met President James Tyler.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he went to ask him or through a connection, I presume, went to get a job with U.S. Customs. So he had a meeting scheduled with President Tyler, and he showed up like really drunk and disheveled. And I think it was Tyler's son who noticed it and kind of was just like, "Hey, dude, you got to come back another day, go clean yourself up," and rescheduled the meeting for him. And then he showed up again, very sober, like nicely dressed and clean. Had apparently a good meeting with Tyler, and then tried to solicit him with the stories, which didn't end up so well, I don't think. Wrong president, at least, right? To solicit, but he was an imperfect person, and those imperfections, right? Whether it's his trauma, whether it's him being not great with money, his vices and stuff. He's very honest with it in his writing, right?
I agree.
It really permeates a lot of his short stories and his poetry, and to see that kind of honesty almost break through the lens of speculative fiction in that way is really awe-inspiring.
Absolutely, and I think that's why one of the reasons why he resonates still to this day. I think that's why so many people feel connected and so many people are still interested in his writing. For me, I think it's just the way that he wrote is just so beautiful. But there is that vulnerability, and there is he's incorporated so much of like the day-to-day challenges and the day-to-day crises that we all face.
Yeah. When's he going to be able to get the next fire going for his wife?
Exactly. I do have, which we will be bringing about shortly. Do a little happy birthday to Poe. Yeah, I mean, and the fire too. That's another interesting thing too. Everyone thought that he was such a wild gambler and things like that, but one of the reasons he gambled so much is that he was so poor. And when he first started gambling, it was because John Allan refused to give him money to finish college. So he started gambling, and he was so poor at that time that he was actually busting up his furniture to burn that to keep warm.
Yeah. And he had debtors, right, that were coming after him due to that money. And that's actually how he ended up enlisting in the military, right?
Under Edgar A. Perry.
Under Edgar A. Perry, exactly. To kind of either escape those debtors and pay them off, presumably, you know.
Yeah, when you could do that, you could just change your name and be someone else.
Oh, yeah. Not an easy process these days.
I think that there's just so many fascinating things about him. I'm still so influenced by, not just by his writing, but by just the fact that someone tried to persevere and become a professional author at a time where it just was not a thing. It just speaks to the depth of his art and the depth of his character. And still to this day, absolutely amazed. I think I reread some Poe stories about once a month.
Oh, that's great. That's very good.
And we do. This is such a far not even connection, but I feel like it is. Here in Keyport, we have legends of Captain Kidd's treasure being hidden here.
Okay.
And the legends of Captain Kidd's treasure inspired Poe to write the book, The Gold Bug.
So, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, maybe here in Keyport, we influenced Edgar Allan Poe just a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, Jersey does pop up a bit in his works, right?
Absolutely.
Same thing with the murder of
Marie Roget.
Yeah, it mentioned Weehawken.
Yeah.
Anyone who's, from Weehawken, Poe gave you guys an honorable mention.
And there's houses everywhere throughout the East Coast where he's lived, like Philadelphia, Boston. I believe the house that he was born in was taken down in Boston. But they do. Have you seen the statue in Boston?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cool. For those of you guys who haven't seen it, I'll post up a picture later on the Creepy Parlor. But there's this beautiful copper statue that was commissioned to celebrate, I believe it was one of the anniversaries of his passing or his birth. I can't remember which. But it's interesting because it's deliberately facing away from Frog Pond in Boston, because he used to call the Bostonians Frog Pondians. That was like his insult for them. So it's sort of him like walking away from the Frog Pond.
That's super funny.
Yeah.
Frog Pondian, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of interesting things with him, though. I think like every place around there has some, everyone wants to be the claim to fame, like Poe wrote The Raven here or Poe wrote this here. But there's, I believe in New York City was where I can't recall off the top of my head. Do you know where The Raven was written? Was it Baltimore or New York? I'm embarrassed. I can't remember.
I want to say New York, but I could be wrong. I don't recall.
Yeah, there's a bunch of places I mentioned earlier that where he lived throughout New York. And then there's Baltimore. Have you been to the Baltimore house?
I have not.
I did not quite make it to the house. I went to his grave, and years ago, they did a reenactment of his funeral. So they decided, since only 6 or 7 people showed up to his actual funeral, the Historical Society in Baltimore reenacted, and they actually had an effigy of Edgar Allan Poe in a coffin. They had a horse-drawn hearse. They had women in widow's weeds walking behind the hearse. They had bagpipes. And there were several hundred people who showed up. I believe, I'm going to look into, I think if I'm remembering correctly, I think John Aston, the original Gomez Addams, spoke.
Oh, wow. That's really neat.
Yeah. He does a lot of Edgar Allan Poe stuff down there. He lives in Baltimore. He does a lot of Poe stuff down there. But we were really lucky. We got to see the whole procession. I have a video of it. I'll try to post that to the Creepy Parlor as well, because it was really, really cool. And it was kind of like he's finally getting the send-off that he deserves.
I know, right? There's almost like an irony to celebrating his birthday also. I don't think he celebrated much of his birthdays in the past.
I don't think so either. I think birthdays weren't quite celebrated the way they are today, right?
Probably not for the poor. I mean, who knows? Maybe I'm not certain, but yeah, I always felt like there was kind of an irony to be like, do you celebrate his birthday or his death day? Like, what would be more appropriate? I can't believe I just asked that question.
You're on the creepy parlor. It's okay.
You know, like, is it more appropriate to celebrate his? Let us know in the comments below. Do you think we should celebrate?
Yeah, exactly. What do you guys think? Do you think that it would be better to celebrate his birthday or his death day? I celebrate both.
Why not? Porque no los dos, right? Like, you know, it's more than me. I just do the birthday. I figured, why not? He probably can get many birthday kicks in his life.
Exactly. But he should have.
Also, how would you celebrate like a death day? Like, with cake? I don't know.
With brandy.
The Irish might do it, right? Yeah, like an Irish, right? Or wait. Yeah, never experienced that one.
Yeah. Baltimore is an interesting place. They had a lot of really cool post stuff. In addition to that, I was talking about my road trip too. We only have a few minutes left. The road trip that I took, I stopped at the Hiram Haynes Coffee House in Petersburg, Virginia. Okay. And that is where Poe and Virginia spent their honeymoon. So it was pretty cool that I actually got to see their honeymoon suite and see where they stayed. And yeah, it was interesting.
That's one way to describe it,
I'm like a Poe stalker. There's a Poe toaster.
I just go to areas where he slept. Just go. Do they know the street where they found him in? I wonder if that's kind of like a little landmark.
Oh, does anybody know?
They did it for JFK. They might as well do it for because they have like the Exxon Street in Dallas.
I'm not sure, but there's the horse you rode in on, the bar, claims that is the place where he took his last drink.
Oh shit, that's a claim.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a powerful claim if you got that.
That is. I mean, I don't know how much of a challenge they got towards it, but
and allegedly his last words were, "Lord, help my poor soul." That's dramatic.
Yeah. He was apparently like feverish also. They reported him being super feverish and seeing phantasms and stuff.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
Not utter a word for a few days and then all of a sudden yell out, "Lord, help my poor soul," just prior to passing. I think that's pretty dramatic.
It's poor soul.
One of the other cool things too that I found interesting about him is that he was really interested in phrenology, shapes of the skull.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and all that science, that pseudoscience behind it. So.
Oh, dude, yeah, the Dupin stories definitely kind of that a little bit. He was very interested in, being as detailed as possible. And I think one reviewer, Lacan maybe, or Derrida, that said it was like unnecessarily tedious or something in his. But hey, man, it was like 1840 something. Or 30.
Exactly. I wonder if he would have been a stand-up comedian today. Maybe.
Yeah, that would be great if he was. Can you imagine those? That'd be the most depressing set in the world. Or it could be super fun.
You never know. You never know. We were just talking about he may not have been quite that depressed. And then another comment here. Yes, he's portrayed as physically frail. I think that fits the narrative too that we're always looking at. I think a lot of people probably at that time were a bit frail. I know that just prior to his passing, he had just gone through a bout of cholera, which a lot of people did at that time.
Yeah, they also didn't have like the hormones that we all ingest through like McDonald's and all these things.
Or just even just basic access to protein that we have today that helps us actually become adults. I'm trying to hit some of the comments here before, because we only have like 3 minutes left.
Ooh. Do they have any questions? Are there any questions or comment?
Just mocking on me. Usually I'm drinking seltzer, so they're mocking on me because I don't have seltzer.
Seltzer's great. I love it. It's the pain. Yes. It's the best part of the seltzer.
It is. Yes, he was human. He was human. And I think, again, it really speaks to his vulnerability and his humanity really speaks a lot to why he's still very relevant and very interesting to people today.
Definitely. What are, like, I guess some of the viewers is like favorite stories stuff? What stories of Poe resonate?
Oh yeah. Anyone have a favorite Poe story? We only got like 4 minutes left. And I've got my birthday cake.
Oh, look at that.
Happy birthday, Edgar.
To the original OG horror writer.
Haha. I took that wish for him.
There we go.
Asthma and everything. I'm going to set off the smoke alarms in my house.
That'd been great if it just like went off, turned into a whole different scenario.
Anybody have a favorite? Oh, Mask of the Red Death. Mask of the Red Death is probably my second favorite. I think Telltale Heart is the first. Mask of the Red Death is absolutely my favorite.
Also a fantastic movie adaptation with Vincent Price, if I'm correct.
They combined a few movies for that, a few stories for that, didn't they?
I'm sure.
Hot Frog and
yeah, they did use Hot Frog. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. But I love it. And Darkness and Decay and the Red Death held dominion overall. That's my favorite line. The Telltale Heart. It's such a classic. Absolutely such a classic.
Yeah, we got
Oh yeah. The Pit and the Pendulum, good one. Absolutely. Talk about anxiety. That one keeps you on the edge of your seat throughout the entire thing. And then it's just over. It's like the Pit and the Pendulum, is he going to die? And oh no, it's done. It's all good.
Had a happy ending compared to
some others, right?
There's some others right there. Yeah, I'm definitely seeing a lot of always the Raven. There's a comment there. Mask of the Red Death. Yeah, definitely. I mean, relevant for today too, right, with the pandemic.
Yep, and Cask of Amontillado. That was actually I was on a ghost tour in Boston, and they were talking about how they think that they found the influence for the Cask of Amontillado in Boston. There was a soldier who was walled up alive for insulting him. I'll find the actual reference.
Oh wow. Yeah.
So we are just about out of time. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing this evening with me. Hang on. I'm going to do my outros and we'll catch up in a minute.
Sure. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here and talk about.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining me here on WLFE-DB. So happy to be here and so excited that we got to celebrate Poe's birthday tonight. Keep the comments going. I would love to see what people's favorites are, what they think of Poe. Keep his name going, keep his work alive. Thank you all so much for joining us here tonight at the Creepy Parlor. Have a wonderful week, and I can't wait to see you next week.
Thank you for joining us on the Creepy Parlor. Join us next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern for another fantastic show.